etched around the works. Labyrinth circle. And so it's just kind of full circle that we are going to hear from these speakers tonight, from all of these aspects. The focus is on leadership, which you will hear. And all of our leaders are really leading by example with this cause. That is going to become more and more apparent as each of our speakers tonight share their experiences. Each is a leader in their respective field and values the importance of not only community, but also of Armenian Heritage Park on the Greenway and of contributing to and impacting quality of life. So let us begin. I'm going to introduce each of our speakers, and as I do so, they will appear on your screen. Our first speaker this evening is Vicki Adjami, who is the founding principal of Communications via Design. Vicki's going to come on and give you a wave. We also have Dr. Mahesh Daas, president of Boston Architectural College. Tonight, you will also hear from Souren Etyemezian, who's the owner of Festachi. You will also hear from Dr. Rebecca Grainger, who is the senior advisor for Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, and her focus is on youth and schools. And finally, tonight, you will hear from Emmanuel Owusu, founder and executive director of African Bridge Network. Looking forward to hearing from all of the speakers tonight. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're first going to hear your individual stories. Each is going to share their own or their family's immigrant experience. And after we hear each one speak, there will be time for questions. So if you have questions when you're listening to each of our speakers, you can feel free to put them in the chat on the side of your monitor, and we will hopefully get to as many of those as possible at the end of our evening. So let us begin this evening first with Vicki. Again, Vicki is founding principal of Communication via Design. Good evening, Vicki.
Thank you, Cindy. Hi, everyone. I'm absolutely honored and delighted to be here today, surrounded by this incredible group of accomplished professionals and leaders. I'm grateful to Barbara Talanian for the invitation, for her tireless work at the Armenian Heritage Park. Barbara, you're a gifted and generous connector and convener. Again, Cindy and Kristen, thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Vicki Adjami, and I was asked to share with you the journey that shaped me as a visual designer with the connection to my heritage. And of course, when Barbara asks for anything, it's impossible to say no. Starting from the beginning, my parents, both of Armenian descent, embarked on a courageous journey from Aleppo, Syria to the United States right after their marriage. And their determination to provide a better future for their children led them here to the land of opportunity. My father was in the Oriental rug and antique business, and my mother worked for a pharmaceutical company. And despite facing countless challenges and their limited formal education, my parents instilled in us, their 3 children, the values of hard work, integrity, and the pursuit of excellence. And this surely carried some pressure to excel academically and reap the opportunities that lay ahead, the familiar story of the American dream. But in the pursuit of good grades and obedience, my passion led me toward a different path, in the path of artistic expression. Even so, my parents envisioned a more traditional route for my future. So in college, I was exposed to all aspects of the arts, but I connected most strongly to the discipline of graphic design. And it occurred to me how my exposure to Oriental rugs, their colors, patterns, texture, craftsmanship, as well as the symbolic images, influenced my true calling: communication through abstract symbols, icons, and design, ultimately. And from this point forward, I was aware of how being first generation Syrian Armenian had contributed to shaping my identity and my worldview. So after college, I moved to Los Angeles to start my career. working for many agencies and soaking up as much experience as possible. And I was particularly drawn to live in a neighborhood off Hollywood Boulevard, which today has been coined Little Armenia. And it was purely serendipitous. Although the restaurant at the end of the block, Ara's, with its scent of buttery rice pilaf emanating from its doors, should have tipped me off. And then years later, fate led me back to Boston, where I would sow the seeds of my own company, Communication via Design. And the meaning of the name was derived in the vein of art, the art of conveying messages, emotions, brand essence through the strategic use of visual elements. And just as words are the building blocks of language, design elements such as color, typography, imagery, and layout are the building blocks of visual communication. In marketing, this concept emphasizes that design is not just about making things look good, it's about creating a dialogue with your audience, both visually and verbally. Over the years, my perspective on leadership and purpose had evolved. And I discovered that true success lies not in climbing a corporate ladder, but in lifting others as we ascend together. And this thinking led to recharging my company's mission and steering toward nonprofits and social enterprise organizations. It always felt good to do good work, but it feels even better to work collaboratively and in partnership with organizations that are shaping our world for the better. For me, art and service are not separate. They're intertwined pillars that uphold my identity and purpose. In honor of my heritage, I hope to be a catalyst for change, both within my profession and beyond. And whether through teaching, volunteering, or mentoring, I'm committed to paying forward the opportunities and the blessings I've received. And as I look toward the future, I envision a world where art and design serve as catalysts for connection and understanding, and a world where we embrace our differences and celebrate our shared humanity. So I'm deeply grateful to all of you for allowing me to share my story. I do believe it's our responsibility as a diaspora to work together to make positive change, whether through art, service, education, science, or commerce. Because at the end of the day, true leadership isn't about creating followers, it's about nurturing more leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Very well said. And I love how the rug was so important in your journey. That's a really, really wonderful story. We look forward to speaking with you again in just a few minutes. But we now want to check in with Dr. Mahesh Daas, who is president of Boston Architectural College, and hear a little bit about his journey in getting here tonight. Good evening.
Great. Well, Cindy, thank you so much. And Barbara, thank you so much for your very kind and enthusiastic invitation to share my journey along with my distinguished and wonderful fellow panelists today. And thank you all for joining us. I truly cherish this honor. And it's wonderful to hear Vicki's story, and it just totally moved me and made me think about what are the kind of themes in my life journey that echo and what has brought me to this particular moment. And I'll share with you a few stories, and all of them are connected by a river. So I was born by River Krishna in South India. And I was the first in my family to attend college in India. And I was trained as an architect, and I learned about architecture, I think, when I was in 11th grade or so. Until then, I thought I would become some kind of an engineer, aerospace. I was pretty sure I would become that. And then I discovered architecture. And being the first in my family to, try to go to college and then attend the college, it was quite an experience. So I'll share with you one story. At that time, only about 3% of the population of India had higher education credential. So for somebody like me, coming from a lower middle class family at the time, it was not as likely to be going to college. And you have to compete with about 70,000 fellow students who take what is known as entrance examination, which is kind of like SAT, except that you are ranked. So if 70,000 students take it, they're all ranked 1 through 70,000. And if you're not in the top 1,000, then you don't get into the college. And so I did that. And then for architecture, I learned that I had to take another entrance exam on top of it. So 2 exams together. And I was, I don't know how I did it, but I was fortunate to have been, placed number 5 in the rankings. And so I got in and I left my hometown of Vijayawada at the time. So that is one story. I left that river and went to the city of Hyderabad, which is in south central India, and it is by the river Musi. And so that's where I spent the next 5 years, really a process of self-discovery and a very formative stage. And so that was quite an extraordinary time and a very powerful time. And I learned about architecture and the world history and so on and so forth, as college does. It opens you up to the world and enlarges your world, expands your horizons. And it did all of that without a doubt. And then came, the calling about advanced further education. And so I was familiar at the time with, I'm a science fiction fan, by the way. And I do other things too, but science fiction is a very big influence on me. And so I was familiar with Superman comics and Superman movies and all of that. And I thought I knew Kansas quite a bit. So I went to Kansas for my master's in architecture with specialization in urban design. And when I landed in Kansas in the middle of winter, by the way, I landed there in January of 1991, so about 3 decades ago. And that was quite an alien landscape for me, and landing in the middle of snow, and that too in the middle of the night. So it was quite a surreal experience for me. And definitely Kansas was nothing like what I saw in comic books. So that, but that also offered me an opportunity to really reflect on and provide a space for something extraordinary. So there, I lived on a farm for a summer. Actually, while I was a student there, I did community service programs in central Kansas, rural Kansas, and in a city called Great Bend and Ellenwood, Kansas. So I lived on a farm, and then I lived with an attorney who was a right-hand person for one of the presidential candidates at that time, Bob Dole. And so I learned a lot about, and I worked on Santa Fe Trail development. So that really gave me a kind of front seat immersive experience to the history of the United States. And then I continued my journey, and that journey took me to Illinois, Chicago, and then to Texas in San Antonio, and then to Indiana and Kansas, and now in Boston as well. Now, through all of this, there is one more river that matters a lot. The city of Benares, which is around a 4,000-year-old city in India, was what I did my thesis on, master's. And that really transformed my view of a lot of things. And then it suddenly reminded me of a story from my heritage, my family history, which I will share with you in conclusion. So we go back to 1850s. And at the time in India, my ancestors were in a village by name Thalaprol, that's in South Central India, more to the east and coastal, a bit coastal. So there was a family by name Rangaya, and they had a child, two children, Rangama and a boy named Rangaya. So there was smallpox epidemic in India at the time. Much like the epidemic, or the pandemic, actually, I should say, the pandemic that we have experienced, they experienced a pandemic too. And one day, that pandemic knocked on the doors of Rangaya and Rangama, and soon Rangama passed away, and she was all of 8 years old at the time. But then there were a number of experiences that she appeared to a number of people, and to all kinds of different people in different villages. And she communicated that she wanted a temple to be built, and so they built a temple to her, and that particular temple kind of deifies her, and that stands there still today. And I never, as a child, when I went to the temple, I didn't think a whole lot about it. But I think all of my immigrant experiences reframed my connection to my own legacy and the heritage and family, and think of it in a completely new light, right? So that's, and all of these experiences have taught me a lot about leadership, that leadership is about hope and optimism. Because what do leaders do? Leaders lead where? Leaders lead us into the future. And we go into the future with the hope that it is going to be better. And I think that is something that is in the immigrant experience very evident to me, that there is a strong streak and spirit that tomorrow is going to be better than today. And that is what we go into, and that is what we lead organizations and any other entities that we lead into that future. So that's what opened me up to leadership opportunities 20 years ago. And ever since, I have grown through the ranks, and I'm very fortunate to now be the president of Boston Architectural College, which opened its doors to immigrants and children of immigrants in 1889, so 134 years ago. So in many ways, it is very meaningful to me what I do, both from educational perspective and from the mission perspective. It connects with me and echoes with me, and really instills in me certain humility about what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Daas. And I like your optimism. I like your hope. And we are so grateful that you are not in Kansas anymore and that you are here in Boston. So thank you. Okay, we will check back with you in just a little bit. Our next speaker is Souren Etyemezian, who is the owner of Histashi, and he is going to join us now to talk a little bit about his story and the wonderful product there.
Good evening. Born in Amman, Jordan, came to the United States to study engineering, but I ended up being a business owner. Started in 1990 in roasting specialty nuts in the Mediterranean style, small batches, in very small location in Belmont. And then that's 1990. In 1995, I was in one of an event, Cape Cod, and the vendor next to me was selling products with all cranberry ingredient, cranberry cookie, cranberry jam, cranberry sauce. So I asked him, how can I sell you nuts? He said they should have cranberries in it. So that night I went back, added cranberries into them, came back to him, and I said, would you buy this and sell it in your stores? He said, yes. And that was when the cranberry nutmeg started. And since then, it's been our dominating product, and we've been doing very well with it. After that, in the mid-90s, we started doing wholesale, got into the website, built a website, and started selling online. And since then, we sell in the 3 channels: retail, wholesale, and website. 10 years ago, we started opening retail stores across the city, but now that we're down to 1 store. We moved to our location in Watertown almost 20 years ago, and I call it Little Armenia, because that's where all the Armenian stores are, and the Armenian churches, and the Armenian school. So being an Armenian, I'm very active in the community, but my business is not built on an Armenian product or my background. But I feel that we are part of the community. And since then, retail has been challenged by a lot of variables: labor, costs, consumer behavior. So we come in every day, try to adjust according to what the need is and what's happening. And I've been working with my wife Susan for 25 years, and it's been a good journey. We probably continue. We don't have plans to exit or sell. It's very exciting. We feel very happy every day we come in. There's a lot of good challenges, and now we're raising 2 kids, 5 and 6. We walk them down the streets to the Armenian school every day. It's a good feeling. And Pastachi has nothing to do with my ethnicity or where I was born. Our goal is to manufacture good product. At the beginning, when we started, it was challenging because nuts were in the bottom of the pyramid by the FDA guidelines, and now we're on the top. So it's been a good change of the nutritional values of the product and the need of the product and how to use the product. So it's been great to produce a good product every day, sell it in many ways. In personal consumption, we do a lot of gifts. We sell to other stores. Our product is sold across the country in a variety of different channels in the wholesale, hotels, private jets, supermarkets, spas. So it's been great. And again, just being in the middle of the Little Armenia, we still are Armenian, and even the product and the business is not, but we're very connected to the community. I think that's all I have to say.
Wonderful. And I love how it all started with cranberries. Who knew? I learned something tonight. That's great. And to work with your wife for 25 years, that is also wonderful. Some might say that's nuts, but it's working out. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll hear from you again in a little bit. I would now like to welcome Dr. Rebecca Grainger, who is the Senior Advisor to Boston Mayor Michelle Wu for the City of Boston, Youth and Schools. That is your focus. Welcome on in, Dr. Rebecca Grainger.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you for that wonderful pun with the nuts. And Barbara, thank you so much for the invitation in and the invitation to be here tonight. In thinking about my immigrant experience and digging deeper into my roots, it's hard to trace back when my ancestors actually came to the United States. I'm deeply rooted in American soil. My mom is Black, and her side, which is deep in me, we come from people who were enslaved. And so I can trace that back 4 generations, and I can, my great-grandparents and grandparents, actually it was my great-grandparents that brought my grandparents. They migrated from the South, Mississippi and Georgia, to Chicago during the Great Migration, which is where my mom was born. My dad is white, and his family roots on one side are deep in the Ozarks, where my great grandfather was actually an indentured servitude as a child and a young teen, and ended up moving to Montana to make roots and to try and settle. And the way that my dad tells it to me is to dig his own fence posts, so that he didn't have to dig them for other people anymore. Both of my parents were first in their family to go to college. They actually met when my dad went to University of Chicago, and they met going across a bridge, and then ended up in Montana, where there's 4 girls in my family. So 1 was born in Chicago, 2 in Montana, and then we moved to Denver, where my youngest sister was born. When I think about how my identity has helped to shape.
I got a notice, and I.
When I think about how my identity has helped to shape who I am now, it was so important to my parents that we had rich educations. In fact, to the point where when we moved to Denver, when I was just 3, my parents moved outside of the Denver public school system because they were still going through forced busing. And it was important to both of them that we had access to high quality schools, and that we also could walk to school and could stay in the same school system for all 12 years. What that meant, however, was that really we were some of the few kids of color in a predominantly white school experience. And it was also, my parents very much pushed all 4 of us to go to college, and rooted us in what you are given, you also need to give back. And I think that's what led me into education. I actually majored in science in college, and ended up becoming a high school science teacher in a community that was predominantly melanin blessed and lower socioeconomic. And one of the things that really came out while I was teaching is that different people in the United States, very much based on identity and geography, are afforded different experiences. And all throughout my time in education to where I am now, it's been, it's just deep in my cells of how do we shift the experience and make education an uplifting and opportunity for access for all children as they go through it. I taught high school science for about 10 years, and then started to get the feeling of, how do I work more at a system level and expand both my own horizons and reach. And that's when I went to the University of Pittsburgh, where I actually worked with schools across the country through science curriculum, elevating student voice and changing teacher both practices and belief patterns, and making it so that education was really about not only access to opportunity, but also access to choice. And that's what brought me here to Boston. So, both of the roots on both sides migrated across the United States, and I migrated here for school, really to think at a systems level of how do we city services and those outside of traditional public education wrap our arms around school systems and fill in really many of the gaps so that school systems can do the work of educating versus the work of trying to solve all of the societal issues that have arisen for different communities. And so that is what brought me into City Hall to work closely with Boston Public Schools and kids across the city to elevate opportunity for education. And like I said earlier, really to elevate opportunity for choice, because I feel that is truly where liberation is. And, in my belly, that system of service was deeply ingrained from both my parents' journey and then what they imparted into all of us, me and my 3 sisters. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grainger. You have had quite a story on the move, and you are definitely giving back, and props for teaching high school science for 10 years. Amazing. All right, we will check back in with you as well. Our final speaker that we are going to hear from this evening is Emmanuel Owusu, who is founder and executive director of African Bridge Network. Welcome on in, Emmanuel. Nice to see you here this evening.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Barbara and Christine, for working so hard to have me on this evening. I'm happy to be here. I'm originally from Ghana, so I'm a typical friend of the Armenian Park, joined together with a common immigrant experience, as well as the warm personality of Barbara. I moved into Boston 18 years ago to join my family. When I moved into Boston, I came in with a college degree and an experience in management. I used the career centers to revise my resume. I was proficient in English, and yet still nobody will hire me for my degree. So it was a shock and a challenge in all of that. But at the end of the day, I made a decision to go back to graduate school. So I went to Tufts University to study environmental and urban planning and policy. So graduate school is 2 years. Whilst I was in graduate school full-time, I was also working overnight full-time as well. So you could say literally I was burning the candle on both sides of the end there. But that is what immigrants do. The determination to really pull ourselves up is incredible. And this resonates with the people I serve right now. So I use the group privilege from the school, Tufts University, to build my career in land use planning. And the last job I held in that field was with the state of Massachusetts, running different land conservation projects and with an annual budget of $5 million. But this experience I'm sharing with you has a reason, and the reason is it has allowed me to do what I'm doing now. Whilst I was building my career, I was meeting other members of the African community who did not have the support I had when I moved in. And then over time, I realized this issue was not random, but I was meeting more people, and I realized it was much more pervasive that we have individuals who have college degree from another country, and yet still they are not able to use their credentials to build career for themselves and to also support their families. And why is this so? It is because anyone of international degree, when you move into US, you go through what we call the initial downgrade, meaning you don't get to do the same level of job that you were doing in your home country. You are kind of stepped down. And what these individuals are trying to do is basically try to recover from the initial downgrade. But the news is the recovery is not great. Most people would end up being unemployed or underemployed, a situation we call brain drain or brain waste, because basically the brain capacity of these individuals are not being utilized. So we call it brain waste. How does it show up? There are several people around. Probably you sat in an Uber being driven by an engineer, or maybe someone who is an overnight security guard will have a professional experience. I see many doctors from another country serving as CNAs. And it could be in your own family. If you trace back a generation or two, the first person to move into the US experienced what I'm talking about. So let me stay with the African community for a little bit and I'll branch out. There's 3 million Africans, immigrants in the US. It's considered one of the most educated people in the US. But when it comes to the labor market, they are the most unemployed. The other group of immigrants that are also unemployed are skilled immigrants from Southern America. So the issue of barriers and discrimination that Black and brown people face in America translates to recent skilled immigrants as well. So wanting to help this population that is immigrant of college degrees led me to start African Bridge Network. The name African is because I started with the African community, and basically the goal was to help them rebuild their career in the Commonwealth after the initial downgrade. So hindsight, I would say, my struggle in trying to build my career when I move in has become my blessing because it has allowed me to do what I do now and do it quite well, I must say. To build anything from scratch without any guarantee of support or success requires some leadership that identify with the challenge of the people you are trying to lead. And why what I do matters is that right now in Massachusetts, there's about 250,000 residents that have foreign college degree. Half of them are struggling to build career in Massachusetts when employers are looking for talent. In the entire United States of America, we have 2.3 million people who are underemployed or unemployed, and yes, still they have a college degree from another country. In terms of economic impact, Massachusetts failing to connect these individuals with the right kind of job costs us $2.3 billion every year as we go along. Our approach is quite simple. We recognize these individuals have talent, have skills, they have assets with them. We build on those assets. We don't want them to start from scratch. Our goal is to help them get into middle-skill job. In a year, we serve about 500 clients, and I'll give you the economic impact here. The average person that comes to us will be earning $32,000 with the work they are doing. By the time we're done with them, the average salary that they will be getting is $65,000. I've seen people signing up for $72,000. All within a year. What we're doing is we're doubling their income. We give them access to a job, and above all, giving them an opportunity to make a meaningful contribution to our society. I would say I do what I do because I want to make sure those who are coming after me have the support that they need. And I think everybody can help on this mission. And if this resonates with you, I'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I love how you said you are making your struggle your blessing. That is awesome and really poetic and true to what you just explained. Okay, so we have time for questions. Whether your question is for Emmanuel or any of the others that you've heard from tonight, I invite you to take a look at the chat on the side of your screen. Hopefully you know how to get the chat up, because that is where your questions are going to be visible to me so that I can read them. I'm going to start with the first question that I see in the chat. I would like to ask the speakers to unmute your audio, during the Q&A response. And we're going to try to get through a few questions and hear at least once from each speaker. So if you could keep your responses fairly short to just a couple of minutes, 3 to 4 minutes tops, that would be great. All right. First question, let's see. Kristen is saying, I noticed a common thread of education moving you and inspiring your journeys. So let's direct this to Dr. Grainger. How much do you think your exposure and being rooted in different parts of the country influenced who you are today? You moved around a lot from what you said.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Kristen. You know, I feel like if I take it through the lens specifically of being in schools across the country, I think there are unique things about what we do across the country, but there also are repeated patterns that you see everywhere. And it's, you know, I think it's deeply ingrained in how our education system was formed and then also how it spread. And so, you know, being able to grow up in the Mountain West, really, you know, schools are larger and also you kind of move at a different pace. And then coming now over to the East Coast, having to just think differently about how you also build a school system within both the constraints and the expansiveness of a city, right? There are so many opportunities that our kids can get to using public transportation or, you know, all of the different cultural institutions that kids can have access to. It also means that we need to think differently about how we build schools and how we give kids access to green space. So I feel like being able to see how different parts of the country are solving different problems and engaging really just makes it more expansive and more creative because it just broadens horizons for what we could be doing. And I just think it's really important to be learning from lots of different viewpoints and perspectives, education and otherwise, to get better at how we do education.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Grainger. Next question is from Marshall Raynar. And the question is, how do you fortify yourself against the rhetoric of today regarding immigrants? And I will open this up to any of our speakers who would like to take it. How do you fortify yourself against the rhetoric of today regarding immigrants?
Emmanuel here, I'd love to chime in on this. So I think I recently posted something on LinkedIn and I said, immigrants are actually a gift from other countries to the United States. We have individuals, especially those that I work with. Other countries have invested in their education and they have experience and they self-elect to come to the United States to deploy themselves and their skills to this great country. Yes, when they are coming in, the appearance can be deceptive, right? But give them a year or two, this is actually the spring that keeps America young and vibrant. And I believe I'm speaking to the choir. So for me, the rhetoric is really not founded. It's out of fear. I will encourage anyone to spend some time with the folks I work for. And you realize that this rhetoric is really false. It's really not the case at all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next question is from Elise Latham. This is, how do your personal experiences influence what you do? So either Souren, Vicki, anybody want to take that one? How do your personal experiences influence what you do?
I would say from my personal experience, I take it and I just improve the next day. I look at the challenge, what happened, what went wrong, and how I can improve it. That's how I use the experience.
It seems like your business has grown quite a bit, just even product wise from where you started, right? Has that kind of been a progression along the way?
Correct. Yes. Every day we look at what we do good, and we want to stay with that. And if we feel uncomfortable with a segment or a product or a decision, we try to put it behind and walk away from it because it's not going to help us. We want to just be comfortable, happy, and perform well. To learn from what we do every day.
Where did where did the name come from?
Well, when we started, the name was Mixed Nuts, and one day an older customer walked in and started yelling at me, say, "What is this? Everything mixed nuts, mixed nuts, mixed nuts," because we had the name of the brand and the business, and then the product name, and then since that day, that's a good experience that I started thinking, then it's something wrong with the name. It was too generic. And then we started researching, looked into Haagen-Dazs, Starbucks, and all these unique brands, how they came up with their name. And we after 3 years, we found the name Fastaci. Sounds nutty. It sounds, a lot of people think it's my last name, which is not, but it's okay. I'll take it.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I feel like this would be a good way to bring back in Vicki, because, a lot of what you were saying when we first started out was kind of having to do with your brand and how you communicate that brand, right? So maybe just changing a name or thinking about how important a name is can kind of relate to what you do in your business.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When we talk about communication by way of design, you really then have to, you have to own it. And so it's a back and forth process of, not just working in a bubble or a silo, but really taking all that information that you're getting from your client and their audience and who you're communicating to. So in doing that, it really keeps you honest about what you're doing. And like I said, I think that, my personal experience just brought me back around to just making sure that we're doing this and putting, we're just feeling really good about the work we're doing and the communities that we're lifting as a result of this. And that just made it a very clear and easy choice to move toward nonprofits and social enterprises, because this is how our world is going to get stronger and better and become more unified. So I think, we've seen that in our own, certainly in my upbringing and within this community. So it's a matter of just, again, paying it forward, working toward making this work on a much larger scale. So I would say that's how I'd approach it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vicki. And I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat, but I have one question, and this is for President Daas. It goes back to when you were talking about before landing in Kansas and taking those tests. Did you say you scored 5th out of 70,000? Did I hear that correctly? That was my question.
More or less. I think more accurately, it is a subset of it is the ones who take both tests. So I stood 5th in that group.
Well,
yeah,
that is amazing. That is
yeah.
fantastic.
That's it's more of the odds are against you is the point there. So since then, I always believe that you can achieve what you set your mind to. A goal that you choose, you can achieve it. There is nothing impossible. And that's a kind of, it's not just a question of optimism. I think it's a question of conviction that you can. And that's partly entrepreneurial. and that is partly the ability to be creative with any challenges that are thrown at you as opportunities, and always be looking at things as opportunities, and always be hopeful, and always lead people to a better tomorrow.
Well, all right, with that, I say thank you very much to you and all of our speakers who have joined us here tonight. Really leaders in all of your respective fields, and so wonderful to hear about your journeys that have brought you here to us and sharing those experiences tonight. Thank you to Kristen, who is hosting us virtually tonight, and thank you to everybody at home who has joined us as well. Together, let's continue to celebrate what unites and connects us. Those are both concepts that are key to Armenian Heritage Park on the Greenway. And maybe when the weather warms up, we can all pay a visit to the park and celebrate together. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful evening.